padre hace 40 años.
The land I inherited from my father 40 years ago, and I sowed it with cocoa because I thought that that was the best future for me and my children.
Y estamos vendiendo en los países fuera, en Europa.
And we are selling to the outside countries like Europe, Germany, that have the best prices.
Porque pensamos que ese es el mejor tiempo de vida para
Because we think that that is the best time in life to live with our children.
A mis hijos lo enseñé para que ellos sepan.
And I taught my children so that they know how it is to earn a living. Actually, right now, I'm raising a child who is growing up thinking that I'm already 70 years old.
Y creo que es lo mejor para mí cuando yo esté más viejito.
And I think that that is best for me when I get older, that my children bury me and live off of what is left.
We fundamentally believe in free trade, but it must be fair trade. We think that the EPA can have great benefits for the region, but it's too early to tell what's going to happen because the whole process is still in the implementation phase. But in general, the rum sector has been a sector that was growing, and we still think that there are great possibilities for Caribbean rums that are part of the WIRSPA membership to grow the market share and become more visible within the European Union market.
Exploiting the full value of the EPA, however, requires some spadework that remains to be done in building out the substructures on which the treaty rests. One critical element of this is the establishment of mutual recognition agreements, under which the parties would recognize professional qualifications and credentials of each other. Professional associations on both sides will have to discuss and make recommendations for MRAs within 3 years.
There is a commitment for mutual recognition of qualifications, all right? Because you can't take advantage of certain opportunities unless they recognize you. A management consultant, okay, we recognize you as a management consultant. This has to be negotiated. It's not going to happen by itself. The management consultants are not going to get up and go to Brussels and negotiate mutual recognition in terms of management consulting. And you could name that for any profession. Some organization has to drive that process.
In order for the individual to deliver his service in Europe in his or her own right, you need to satisfy the criteria for the market, the qualifying criteria. And that raises what we call mutual recognition of qualifications, because each of the EU member countries have specific qualifications that you need to meet, to satisfy in order to supply a particular service.
One of the challenges that we will face, and we knew this going into the negotiations, is that some of our service providers would have a difficulty entering the markets, the European markets, because those markets wouldn't necessarily recognize our levels of accreditation, hence the need for MRAs or mutual recognition agreements. We have already started the process of mobilizing the various groups and associations, urging them to structure their associations so that their levels of accreditation and their standards are pretty well documented so that they can enter into negotiations with their partner associations in the EU markets.
But at the very least, it's going to be to get these public agencies to be able to do the levels of certification that are recognized internationally. So we're going to have to make sure that they're able to do that. And on the other hand, the firms are going to have to learn the standards that are the requirements of the market and meet them. And then we're going to have to work together so that we can gain market access.
One group of professionals already being dealt with involves the region's architects.
We've got services in the agreement, and that's good. But one of the things that we've done is seen that the businesses themselves are talking to each other. Now, one specific sector, architects, are saying, well, one of the problems that we've got is the way that our mechanism to be able to recognize each other, what we call mutual recognition of qualifications, are working. So they're looking at ways to make those work together. So if they can find a way of saying, let's recognize each other's qualifications, that builds on the environment that we create within the EPA in order to be able to make that trade flow. So that's a services trade. There'll be others to follow. Could it be teaching? Could it be law? Could it be cooking? Could it be anything else? These are the things these are the ways that you can open things up through services.
The European Union has now putting as one sector in advance of the others the architectural services. And the Architectural Council of Europe, which is an association which is governing all the architect services providers in Europe, has already started to sign mutual recognition agreements, private sector to private sector. An architect which has got his diploma from a university in Bridgetown or in another island, they will see what he has done during his course, all his years in university. They will look at what he needs to go to provide his service and get his qualification recognized in Germany or in France or in Spain or in Latvia, by looking at what is required in the EU. In the EU, the job has already been done because we have got a professional qualification directive, which is putting on the paper everything required for more than 17 sectors. So now we have that in the EU. We have to see with the Caribbean island architect what is already required there. They're going to discuss to see what is needed, and then they will need to transform this private sector to private sector text into a internationally binding agreement.
The possibility of having European partners, it's a major step in order to accelerate that process of adapting into the European markets. And I think that the possibilities are not only related to the architectural firms, the established architectural firms, but to the independent architects that can go on their own and have access to European offices in Europe. It's a major step that the EPA is going to provide us. Having the possibility to work with European partners in projects not only here in the Caribbean but also as well as in Europe. And I think that inter-regional access to the CARICOM market it's a very appealing part of the EPA.
When we come back, experts explain how the EPA goes beyond market access. Ultimately, however, the core goal of this far-reaching treaty is fundamental transformation, which is why the EPA goes beyond the issue of merely opening up markets to embrace the broader requirements for survival and growth in today's highly competitive global environment.
We've turned a page. We've now created a new environment, a new paradigm in which we can operate with each other. It's very Caribbean specific as opposed to all ACP. It's dealt with needs and concerns that have been directed by the Caribbean, not by people in the Pacific or in Africa. It's addressed issues like liberalization of trade, it's addressed issues like services, it's addressed the development cooperation aspects, it's looked at competition, and it's created an institution which enables us to continue to implement and monitor what's going on.
But one of the good things about the agreement is a commitment by the Europeans to assist us to bring our production levels, both in the technical standards area and in the sanitary and phytosanitary area, up to the levels that are required to be able to access the market.
But there are certain basic demands that the market requires, and British buyers have the right, European buyers have the right to demand inspection of your facilities and to make certain that and it's not a barrier, it's a requirement for health. They haven't been brutal and draconian about it, but at some point they will be. So it means that a small firm has to go through the process of qualification.